But now I don't see those cobbles and curbs. I don't hear the blues anymore.
Rough Trade is giving away a third off the first 3 months of the Rough Trade Club plus new music membership exclusively to 101 Part-Time Jobs listeners. Become a member of Rough Trade Club New Music and you'll receive the Rough Trade Album of the Month straight to your door every month on exclusive vinyl pressing with exclusive bonus material. Club members have received exclusive pressings of albums from Sufjan Stevens, Sprints, The Last Dinner Party, Julie Byrne and Over Mono, just to name a few, this past year alone. Sign up using the promo code CLUB101POD and you'll get the Rough Trade Album of the Month, English Teacher's excellent debut album, This Could Be Texas, on exclusive Galaxy Gold for a third of the usual price. Here's English Teacher on a recent episode of 101.
How many opportunities do you get to write a debut album and have all of this, sport behind us? I don't know, I really like the idea of holding the bar as being like classic songs.
You only get one shot at a debut.
Don't want the album of the month but still want all the benefits? Sign up to the standard tier using Club 101 Pod and you'll still get the first month free. You'll also get free shipping on all orders, 10% off the bar and on secondhand vinyl in store, and exclusive access to sold out Rough Trade events. So don't hang around. Go to roughtrade.com/club and sign up with the code CLUB101POD. That's CLUB101POD and claim money off the album of the month, English Teachers This Could Be Texas, today. This offer's available to UK residents only. Do you play in bands? I did for the longest time. And I wish that I knew that DistroKid was a thing. I don't even think it existed back then. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming services. When you get DistroKid, you can see a DistroKid bank and withdraw your earnings. You get notified when you've earned royalties and you can withdraw via the app. And you can even check your streaming stats on Spotify and Apple. Get 30% off your first year on DistroKid by going to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. 30% off for your first year. That's not bad. We know it's a tough world out there. Why don't you make it easier for yourself? And to get 30% off that free year as an artist, where you get 100% of your royalties and earnings, go to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. All right, stay with me. I'll be right back after this.
You are about to participate in the most ambitious culinary experiment ever imagined.
This competition is going to test everything.
Adapt quickly to anything. I mean anything. The wildest day of your life starts right now.
Series premiere 24 and 24, Last Chef Standing. Sunday night at 8 on Food Network. Stream on Max.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder, where I usually speak to bands and artists about how they've got through it all. The music industry can be fickle, it can be cruel, and there's no real easy way. That's what I want to get here, stories about building your own world around music. Today's episode is a little bit different, but equally the same. John Kennedy of Radio X has been the purveyor of new music, a fearless leader of independent talent. He was the first person on the radio to play the XX, Adele, Razorlight, the Futureheads, and hundreds of bands. He's been the first person to put them on national radio. John has been involved in putting on gigs ever since I remember, and he's just generally kind of been a fixture of someone who believes in independent and alternative music, which is everything that 101 Part-Time Jobs is about. He's got a brand new show on Radio X, X-Posure Daily, where it's an hour each day of brand new, independent, a lot of unsigned bands getting their first national radio play. John cares so much about new music and supporting bands, so I was thrilled to bring him on and ask about his story, how he became a radio presenter, how he's been able to move with the times and the trends that music naturally has, and his own stories of sleeping on floors to make it work. So I hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe as well to get notified as and when I've got brilliant episodes coming out. Cooler Shakers tomorrow, future episodes with Bombay Bicycle Club and the Murder Capital. So subscribe and get messaged as soon as those episodes, the minute they come out. I've also got a newsletter called P45 RPMs where I'm writing about new music. I've also got some breakfast recipes that I've got been hidden away in my little book for years that I'm going to pull out for it. Last week I wrote about the time I accidentally went to Boston, Massachusetts to write a story on Leonardo DiCaprio. Lots of stuff to come on that newsletter. If you want to sign up, and I suggest you do, 101parttimejobs.com is the place to go. Just put your email in there and you'll get emails from me on Sundays. Before we get into this episode, I'm going to speak with Rebecca from the band Eka, who is a brand ambassador for Ampolo, which is a free app. You can download it now. If you want to practice along with an existing song, you say you want to play bass to Rage Against the Machine, but you want to play along with it, you can take the bass out and practice along just like that. I think Rage Against the Machine is my... Bomb Track was the first song I learned to play on bass. That first song you learn, it stays with you, doesn't it?
I remember mine, which was Just Like a Prayer on saxophone. But yeah, I mean, I used to play that for hours, like trying to get it right alongside the CD player.
You sat there trying to rewind, get it to the right point.
Playing along kind of with the vocal. It's great for kind of doing covers and just learning the songs, basically.
And that's on Ampolo. It's free. Anyone can download it now on the App Store. You can record yourself so you can see how you're looking when you play it. Make sure your tongue's not sticking out when you're trying to play some riffs. Happy practicing. All right, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs, and here is the independent and alternative broadcaster. Find out your new favourite band every Friday and Saturday night on Radio X, and now every weekday on the Global Player. Search for X-Posure Daily. Here he is. It's John Kennedy. 101 Part-Time Jobs.
An overnight sensation usually has been working for years to get to that point that they become an overnight sensation.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. It takes a lot of perseverance for something to happen. You know, and it's interesting when you asked me on, Giles, to come on. You know, I was thinking about this idea, the kind of concept of the show, and the idea that people are following their dreams, so they're working part-time jobs in order to get to the dream. And I did a little bit of that in a way, but it was flipped around. So I had a day job, and being on the radio full time and being paid for it, that was the dream. And it took quite a few years to get to that dream. So I didn't have a part-time job, but I had a full-time job. Yeah. And anything else, any kind of aspirations about being on the radio were all the part-time extracurricular activity. I mean, I like to dress it up and say, so I worked for the BBC and worked in the gramophone library of the BBC for quite a long time. And so I was a librarian by day and a demon of the decks by night, kind of dressing up in a kind of superhero fashion. But
we partly do it for yourself, don't you?
Yes, yeah, totally. That's exactly it.
It's fun in that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's great.
And so your story is that you were at Thamesmead?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So basically, I went to university and I started DJing at university. We didn't have a student radio station at the place I was at, and there didn't seem to be many of those anyway at that particular point, which is in the 1980s. But I did start DJing. I started a club night with a friend. And
is that Sharp as a Needle?
No, that's a radio show. That's a radio show.
What was the night called?
The night was called The Plastic Factory. And so I started, me and a mate thought, kind of everything's a bit boring. Well, let's put on a night and we'll just play some records. So, and we didn't know how to do that, so we just did it. And then I started, because I was doing that, I did extra bits of DJing at other events. And kind of at the same time, I started writing about music for the university magazine, which is like a weekly magazine. And I kind of thought, you know what, really, I want to work in the world of music somehow. And so I was from London. I came back to London after I did my degree, which was in Norwich at the University of East Anglia.
Great town and gigs there as well.
Yeah,
Lots
totally.
of pubs.
Yeah, it was funny because I think when I got there, it was between scenes. So the scene that was just before me had given the world the likes of the Higsons and Serious Drinking. And then there are a few bands lingering around still when I was there. And then maybe years later, there were some other things going on there. But at the same time, it was just brilliant to go to somewhere different and to be your own boss, as it were. But coming back to London, I didn't know how you got on the music industry. I didn't know how you got on the radio or started writing about music. But what I did do was answer an advertisement for a media course for the unemployed, because I was unemployed. And this media course was based in Thamesmead at this cable radio station called Radio Thamesmead, and it was run by community service volunteers. I'll say that again, community service volunteers.
It's a special place to be on the dole doing community.
Yeah.
It's quite a magical place, some might say.
Oh, no, totally. It was amazing. And I didn't get on the course to start with. No, so it was, I applied and they said, sorry, we're all full up, but we'll take your name and we'll come back to you. We'll be doing another course. And they were true to their word and they gave me a ring. And so I ended up doing the course. The course was interesting because it trained you in different things. So they did some radio things. There was a film element to it. And it was just 3 months long. And it was also for a real variety of people. So there were people like me who were graduates, and then there were people who were 16, straight out of school, and then there were long-term unemployed in their 50s or 60s who were looking to get some new skills.
Yeah.
And it was a real variety of people on this course. And it was a really interesting experience. But because I'd been DJing, I said to the radio station, you should let me do a show. And that's where Sharp as a Needle that you mentioned started. So they said, yeah, okay then, go on then. And so I started this show. It was called Sharp as a Needle. And then Radio Thamesmead applied for a community FM license around the same time that loads of other stations were applying. So there was a big kind of amnesty for pirate radio stations. And the idea was that we'll give away some proper licenses. You'll all come off air and we will give away some licenses. So Kiss FM came on air in that time. Choice FM, which is now Capital Extra, came on air in that time as well. And so there were a few different community stations that were created, and Radio Thamesmead became RTM Radio, broadcasting to South East London and North West Kent. And my show, Sharp as a Needle, went on to the FM station. And then I ended up doing that for like 7 years or something.
And those stations got brought in by those bigger companies because presumably they had the listenership. They were kind of winning the competition. The pirates,
Well,
were doing it better.
There was such a proliferation of pirates, particularly in London, but around the country. And the Radio Authority, which is now Ofcom, wanted to stamp down on that. And rather than spend their time trying to find these stations and close them down, they thought, well, maybe this is an indication that there's a need and a demand, so we should answer that. And they thought they had done that in 1990. And then that's when XFM started shortly afterwards, and it realised that the future couldn't be pirate, that it needed to win a licence. And then what it tried to do was convince the Radio Authority that a licence should be given to it to broadcast, but that took 5 years. So at the same time that was all going on, I was continuing at RTM Radio doing Sharp as a Needle, but it was great because I went there once a week. The show maybe started as a 2-hour show, it ended up being a 4-hour show. It moved around the days of the week, and I got lots of people to come in and perform live to air, which was what I do now basically, and it was really exciting. It's a strange setup. So it was a community owned station, but it was very linked into the local council, so the local council funded it, as well as advertising, and that's where, say, organisations like community service volunteers got involved, because then you could kind of tap into a budget that led for
that
training.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Stuff. Yeah.
When you're paying local council tax, you're like, this is going towards something great.
Yeah, totally. And I wasn't a resident of Thamesmead or South East London. I lived in South West London. It was a bit of a commute, so it was like a 40-mile round trip.
Wow.
And at one point, before I learned to drive, because my show ended after the last train left Abbey Wood, which was the nearest train station to Thamesmead at that point, I slept in the office. So I had a sleeping bag in a locker, and then I would sleep overnight, and then I'd get the train into work. By that time, I'd got this job at the BBC Gramophone Library, and so I'd go there on a Tuesday, do my radio show, sleep overnight, put the sleeping bag back in the locker, get the train into London, and go straight to work.
John, here are the stories that we're here for. That's the good stuff.
Yeah. So in a way, that's when the radio show was like the part-time job. So the day job was at the BBC, and it was great, and I loved doing it. And then I learned to drive and realised, I could just drive there and then drive home, which was quite a radical transformation to my life. But at the same time, I kind of like the idea that for quite a long time I slept there in the office, and they allowed me to do that. It was cool. It was funny.
Do you remember feeling like a sense of like that thrill, that kind of sense of purpose? You're like, I'm doing something really good here. It's like rewarding. It's kind of fulfilling your buzz.
Definitely, without question. I mean, I'd got the job at the BBC because I had been doing after the 3-month course, I carried on doing the radio show Sharp as a Needle there, and then they applied to get the FM license, and so while I was doing all that, I was doing some other work as well. So I got a job as a telephone market research person, asking people questions.
How were you at that?
Not very good, and it was a way of earning some money, but it was one of those things where I would be really depressed after doing a session. Yeah. And I kind of thought, oh, well, no, maybe it's a good thing I do this because I'm talking, and maybe it will improve my broadcasting and I'll be better at talking on the radio. And instead, I don't think it necessarily worked like that.
You're going to play an actor, right? And kind of prey on people to an extent.
Yeah, no, totally. It wasn't really my thing, but it was interesting because after that experience, I thought, I've got to get another job. So that I can continue and pursue this radio dream.
And by this point, it was you'd had enough of a taste of the pizza to think, I can do this, and I want to do it, and this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because in a way, I'd been searching for how do I get involved in music, and for some reason, I don't know why I didn't think of working at a record label, but I didn't. And so this. What I liked about doing the radio show was that after doing my DJing in Norwich and still doing a little bit of DJing in London when I could get the opportunity, was that you didn't have the tyranny of the dance floor in a way. When you were playing music as part of a radio show, the next week you could play a whole load of different tracks, and you didn't have to worry about whether it was making people move or not. You could just say, well, check this out, this is really cool.
You could play the folk stuff.
Yeah, you could play a whole variety of music and share your enthusiasm and interest in a way, and so that kind of made me think, this is a way of kind of combining those things, and also at the same time I'd been kind of exploring the magazine world a little bit. I did a work experience at a magazine called Jocks, which was a DJ magazine before DJ magazines existed, but it was aimed at the mobile DJ. And it was in the same building that Melody Maker was in, I think. I think they were occupying a desk a few feet away from us. And it was a really strange magazine. And so I kind of did some work experience there. But I was still lacking in confidence because what I should have done was then walk across to Melody Maker and say, hey, how do I get involved with you? But I didn't.
Hindsight's 2020.
It is. I was a bit shy. And but also I kind of found that, this will sound really bad, but the music journalists I met around that time, I didn't particularly take to, and there seemed to be a snobbery about music writing that I think maybe was necessary, a kind of protection mechanism for writers that kind of I've put me off a bit. And I had a friend who was an aspiring writer, and he got some reviews in NME and stuff, and just through him, kind of his tales kind of put me off a bit further. It's like, I don't know whether I like that world. And this radio thing had started, so it's like, that seems much more welcoming, and it seemed to suit me better. And I like the idea that you could play something, people could then make up their own mind about it, and that was one of the things I liked about putting music on the radio. There's all sorts of things.
No, it's brilliant. It makes me think a few things. First of all, with the NME, the kind of tribalism, I just watched that Sarah Records documentary not too long ago, and they got so much
flack.
Yeah, for really no reason.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, I was a devourer of all those magazines. I bought NME every week. And once I started the radio, it got even worse. I was buying them all. So I was buying, NME, Melody Maker, and Sounds every week to keep on top of this.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like a justification. It's like, now I have got a justification to spend even more money on records, even more money on going to gigs, even more money on buying these magazines. It's quite funny, really, because I've got to be on top of it.
Yeah.
And I've got to listen to as many John Peel shows as I can, and all this kind of stuff. It became a kind of obsession, but I did need to fund it. Going back to, so after giving up the telephone market research, I went to a temping agency and said, I'm looking for some temporary work. And there was this amazing woman who talked to me and said, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What kind of work do you want to do? And I explained this stuff that I'd been doing, this radio, and she said, well, what you need to do is get a job at somewhere like the BBC. So you're in the milieu that you want to work in. And the BBC at that point had a kind of pool. So you could apply for a general job at the BBC. You would just fill in a form and send it in. And I didn't know about this. And she said, well, they do this thing and you should do that. And she kind of almost started having a go at me. She said, you're doing the wrong thing by coming to us. That is not what you should be doing. You should be trying to, it was such good career advice, trying to work in the world of work that you want to work in. However close to it you can get, the closer the better. And so she pointed me in this direction. I came out of that interview not with having signed up to this temping agency and without any horizon of kind of getting some temp jobs, but with at least the realization, the BBC do temp jobs. And so it was funny because I filled in the form, and within the space of a week I got 2 letters back from the BBC. The one which was the general one saying, we don't need anybody at the moment, thank you. But then another letter from the BBC, kind of almost like the same day, said, we've got a job coming up in the Gramophone Library, come for an interview. And then so I went for that interview and got the job, and it was a 3-month temporary post, and then turned into 6 months, and then kind of became a full-time post. But it was just quite funny that there were so many sliding doors about all of these moments. Like at the same moment that I went to do the interview for the 3-month course, media training course with community service volunteers in Thamesmead, I had an interview to go to Tower Records to get a job as a sales assistant there, and I wanted that job. I thought that sounded really cool. But they were both on the same day, so I had to make a decision and a choice, and I chose to go to the media course instead of the job opportunity at Tower Records, and that completely changed my life.
And I bet you didn't know when you made that decision that was 100% the right decision.
No, not at all. I thought, well, I'd love to work at Tower Records. I've always wanted to work in a record shop.
Yeah, it's funny. I think everyone has a handful of those moments in a life where things happen and change all of a sudden from one month to the next. Your life changes.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then the freedom that I was given once RTM radio came into being, I was doing a show every week. And the brief of the show was much what I do now, to play new releases and new music and find new bands and from my own point of view. And somebody got in, and it was weird because different people got in touch when the show was going. Like somebody who's still around today and still doing an amazing job is Vanita from Rocket Girl Records. And so she heard my show by chance. She was like tuning through the airwaves one night and heard the show, and then got in touch to say, I heard your show, and I think you might like some of the stuff that we're working on. And so at the time she was involved with a record label called Cherie, who had a whole load of amazing bands, and she started sending me stuff, and suddenly a whole other world opens up, and then people say, do you want, you've been playing this band, do you want to get them on the show? It's like, okay, yeah. And then so you kind of learn on the job.
Kind of building your own scene.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it never occurred to me to have guests in, but, once the idea was there, and it's like, yeah, come on, do it. And then, and that's, how it all kind of happened, really. And the weird thing is that really that's pretty much what I'm still doing.
How many shows do you reckon you did on RTM? By the sort of end of that period, go before XFM?
Well, they ended up running concurrently, but I was there at least 7 years. I think Sharp as a Needle on FM lasted 7 years. It probably going a year before that. So if a weekly show, 52 shows. I mean, I didn't really take a show off. So we'll say 50 shows a year for that time. Which is quite a lot. And, and
that is a ton.
Yeah, and it was exciting because once it got going, I had some really amazing guests. Like this band Thieves came in, who featured David McCalmont on vocals, who's got an amazing voice, and that was his first band, or one of his first bands. They were kind of an electronic duo, and I remember being completely and utterly blown away by David singing in front of me in the studio. It's like, oh my God, this is incredible, because he had such a kind of world-class voice, and little things like that were just crazy. I had there was an amazing band called Pram from Birmingham who were on 2 Pure Records, which was the home to Stereolab and PJ Harvey and the Faith Healers and Moonshake. And Pram were one of their new signings, and they came in and performed live to air. And then one time they came in with another band also on 2 Pure called Mouse on Mars from Germany, and they did a live jam together, and just stupid things like that, which were hilarious. Were really brilliant, and trying to make that work and I did not know what I was doing whatsoever, but Tinder Sticks came in, Corner Shop came in, some amazing bands.
It's fun. It sounds like fun, and because of the ultimately where the money is. I mean, that's how I see it. When you think about NME writers or sounds writers or melody maker writers, there just quite simply isn't the kind of space to have a column where you can bitch about someone or profess your love and build a shrine for someone else. That's not music journalism today. That's not a diss. That's just the way it is. When you go onto a music website, it will be quite polite. It will be quite PR'd. That's just the world we live in. And I've been that writer. That's just the way it is at the moment. Radio, on the other hand, has remained fun. You can still be silly on the radio, can't you?
You can, totally. Although, I wouldn't... no, you can. But it's weird, because when I was starting out in radio, it seemed to divide, and I think maybe it still does, into people who wanted to be silly, that's all they were interested in, and people who wanted to share their enthusiasm for music. And I think there's still a bit of a divide in that. And I've kind of fallen, and always did and will fall into the more boring side of it, where you just want to share your enthusiasm. No, but it's funny because but
you'll ask bands questions, and they will be you provide the platform for the silliness.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, totally. There's definitely room for that. And and that's a lot of fun. But it is funny because definitely, especially when I was starting out, there were a lot of people who'd been impressed by people like Kenny Everett and Steve Wright, and they wanted to be the equivalent on the radio.
Comedian, music.
Yeah. And some of them were really good, and some of them would be really technically amazing, especially considering it's pre-digital age. So they'd be using cutting up 1/4-inch recordings during the course of their show, turning them around, and then airing the results and stuff like that.
That's unthinkable to think of now.
I know, they'd be so slick. It was amazing, and it was great to meet those people. But they were kind of beyond me, in many ways. It was just like press play and let it speak for itself.
I saw the XFM documentary when it came out.
Right. Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, that has obviously shaped my entire life. And yeah, amazing. It was amazing that film got made. It was incredible, and I was really pleased that it did, because in my mind, I've been telling that story, and maybe in various different pubs, I've been telling that story to so many people from my perspective. And it was great that some kind of document exists to capture that. And I think they did a great job of conjuring up that time, and it was really exciting to see it. It's
kind of a story of like the rascals that get the charge of the spaceship.
Yes.
They get the controls on the spaceship. But it's funny because it seems so obvious. Once it happens, it seems so obvious, because people like music and drinking beer and practical jokes and having fun with your mates. Obviously, that's the kind of thing you'd tune into if it was there.
Yeah, oh, totally. I mean, we're all really passionate about trying to create a radio station that would air music that you couldn't hear elsewhere, or you could only hear at a few moments during the course of a week. and that's what we ended up creating. And
A
we
world
all
of that.
Yeah, totally. And we all really believed in it. I mean, it was very much the school of John Peel. So everybody who was on there probably had listened to John Peel as a youth and were inspired and kind of educated in music by John Peel. And so it was like 24/7 John. And it was amazing, and I was lucky enough to be involved in that. And the RTM stuff led into that. So so how that happened was that I was doing the show Sharp as a Needle. I read in the NME that there was going to be a radio station at the Reading Festival in 1991, and I, after a few phone calls, managed to get hold of the person who was doing that, and he said, "Oh, thank you for your interest, but we don't need anybody. But let me take your number." And then he rang me back and said, "Send me a cassette of your show." And then he rang me back again once he'd got that and said, "There's this wrong with it, there's that wrong with it, but would you like to do 5 shows over the weekend?" And so, that's kind of, and then at the end of that
what
guy,
was wrong with it? Do you remember the point?
No idea. I think I was maybe too opinionated, or too, because I was, I was a bit opinionated, and
those are the times.
Yeah, those were the times, and I'm sure he had some valid criticism, constructive criticism, but I mean that is also the character of this guy, Sammy Jacob, who started XFM. But at the end of the Reading Festival radio thing, which ran for that weekend of the Reading Festival in 1991, he said, "I'm thinking of doing this thing in London. Would you be interested in being involved in that?" And that became XFM, and so I was involved in that from the start. But he'd also previously been running a pirate radio station, Q102. At the same time that I was doing Sharp as a Needle on RTM, Q102 started up, and I was aware of it. And
they had the Cure on.
Yeah, he had the Cure on, totally. Yeah, because he was, Sammy had been a sound engineer for live music, and so he met lots of people. And so when he started Q102, he knew Steve Lamacq, or invited Steve Lamacq to be involved. Steve was an NME writer at the time. And so kind of through Steve, Robert Smith was invited to come on Q102. Robert brought his manager, Chris Parry, with him. They had been broken in the States by college radio and alternative radio there. And they couldn't understand why something like that didn't exist in the UK. And so when Sammy explained his idea, they thought, that sounds like an idea worth getting involved in. And so Chris suggested, why don't you do the station from our offices where The Cure was based, where Fiction Records was based? And so that's how it kind of all happened. And it's documented on the film that you mentioned.
Great film.
Yeah, Kick Out the Jams, the XFM story. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. The kind of creativity business side of that is so inspiring to me. As a kind of skater who grew up building ramps and coming into town to go to the Astoria, like that element of like pairing up something that's like a kind of like lightning in the bottle thought with, oh fuck, we can actually do this, and like build a structure around it and maybe make money, but at least pay for itself, is very cool.
Yeah, it totally is. The money side of it was in the minds of some of the people. For most of us, the money we didn't really think about the money. We didn't know. We just thought, wouldn't it be brilliant if this could happen? Whereas obviously, people like Chris and Sammy thought, we're trying to make a business here. And that's how kind of it changed course a little. Because that's the reality.
Because later on it kind of got bought out, and
but it also costs money to run a radio station. You have to pay to play music on the radio. There are organizations who collect that money, and so every time I play a song on the radio, bands get paid. And that's something that people forget about radio, and that is actually a real strength, and that something should be flagged up more to people. That actually, if you get your band on the radio, and if you're a member of PRS, then you'll be owed money, and that you could get a certain amount of pounds for every play that you get, depending on the size of the radio station. And so that's pretty important. And especially now in the kind of current era where streaming has taken off, and somehow streaming has managed to duck under all those agreements that musicians fought for years to get in place, and somehow they don't have to subscribe to those or adhere to those rules.
If you're an artist, go on PRS, go on PPL, look at what's out there. I mean, when you mentioned when you went into the community job board, where they say, well, what do you want to do? Go for that. It's similar with grants. Like there are grants that people don't know about. You know, they're not advertised everywhere. Maybe it's not the first thing for an artist to think of Googling, grant of whichever country they're in, but it's worth giving it a go, isn't it? Because there are opportunities.
Yeah, and PRS are supporting loads of bands through various different initiatives. Kind of
foundation.
It's great. It's really good, and it's brilliant that it's out there.
When you were talking about radio being, there are all these sides of it that are, it's business and it's creative. It's a lot like being in a band, isn't it? Because you're going to that gig to play music to people and hopefully make some fans, but you're paying for the petrol, you're paying for the car hire, you're paying to get there. A lot of the time you're coming home from your first tours with no money. That element of, you said it earlier, we didn't know how to do it, so we tried. Yeah,
totally. I mean, I didn't really earn any money out of radio until I'd been doing it for about 8 years. So all those shows in Thamesmead, I didn't get any money for. There was a little bit of money in the kind of token money given to us during the XFM trial broadcast, which was very nice. Because I mean the way I juggled that was so we'd be doing these month-long broadcasts twice a year, and I would take holiday from work, and I'd have a week off. So, because my show was on midnight till 2.
So was this XFM?
This was XFM.
Sorry, month-long broadcasts.
So we did a series of month-long RSLs, restricted service licenses, during the period 92 to 97.
That's like having a fake ID for 2 months at a time.
Yeah. So we were kind of on air, and then we'd be off air. But the idea was that we would show and demonstrate the audience was there and prove to the radio authority that it was a good idea and that the music industry was behind this. And
quite vigorous.
It was, but it took way longer than we thought it would. It took 5 years. But in order to juggle that, I would take some of my leave during that time and have a week on where I'd be working during the day and then going to do the radio show afterwards, and then a week off where I would be staying in bed after doing my show and not going to work. And that was part of the fun, but it was all kind of late nights, but the vocation, you're pursuing your dream, because in a way I see this podcast, Part-Time Jobs, about how do you pursue a dream, what do you have to do to do that, and you do that because you love it, and you hope that maybe it could become a reality. And
there's something inside of you that you can't really argue with. You can't not try.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because people did. There were various different points when I was doing my show in Thamesmead that people say, well, why do you do that? Why? You're missing out on this, or you're missing out on that. Like, say, I mean, this will link to a specific time, but I had friends who were supporters of Wimbledon Football Club, who were in the FA Cup campaign, and they were going through round after round. And I went to a few of those matches. But to get a chance to get a ticket for the final, you had to go to a series of Tuesday matches, and my show was on a Tuesday, so it's like, well, I'm not going to that. And they were like, why? And Wimbledon went to the FA Cup final, and they won the FA Cup final.
Brilliant.
But
the Wombles.
But at the same time, if I might have been able to go to the FA Cup final, but I wouldn't have had a job, and I wouldn't have been able to fulfill my dreams of kind of making radio a job, which was amazing. But so there were little things like that, or gigs you've missed out on, or parties you didn't go to, because it's like, oh, well, why can't you come on Saturday? Because I'm doing a radio show. I said, why do you want to do that? Because it's fun.
And sometimes you might not even be able to explain it or articulate it very, in the kind of somewhere that's in a way that's sufficient enough for that conversation. But that's the compromise, isn't it?
Definitely.
Bands will go on tour and miss weddings or
totally.
friends' parties.
Rightly or wrongly. And it's funny. And it all becomes justifiable when you end up with a job and suddenly that job goes on for decades. Then that all seems like there was a plan, but there was no master plan, and there was no guarantee that it would happen in that way. So, there is a bit of a dedication, and you could, it could have come out the other way, and you could have said, oh, well, you know what, that was a bit of a waste of time.
We learn. Everyone's always learning.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
101, 101, part-time jobs. 101, 101, 101, part-time jobs. Not knowing how things are going to go. I mean, that is the music industry, right? I mean, music industry, I always think it's such a sort of rigid, cold word or phrase, but the music, the environment, and the way that who's writing about who and what's coming out on what record labels, that's always changing. That's always evolving. That's kind of the beauty of it, right? How do you think you've kept up with those kinds of trends? You mentioned earlier buying all the music mags.
Yeah, totally. I mentioned football. I'm not really a football fan, as anybody who knows me will say.
What's that AFC tattoo on your arm? Stick and poked.
But I kind of liken my position or my approach to music as kind of being like a football supporter in a way. It's like I'm dedicated to that cause, and I want to keep on top of it because I want to know what's happening. I find it really fascinating and really interesting, and I want to see what those developments are, and it's almost like a fanaticism. And so, yeah, as each different way of keeping up comes along, then I'm trying to keep abreast of it. So now, obviously, the internet is our tool. Before, it would have been magazines and fanzines and newspapers and gig going and record shops. Those are all still very important, I think, and listening to the radio. But now you've got the internet at your fingertips, and you can find versions of those things that we had before, and they're all online, and you can do it in a different kind of way. But yeah, you've got to try and keep on top of it all. And it's funny because I found that, especially in recent years, I feel like I'm out of touch of the world of chart music. Some things become really, really popular, and I don't really know about them, and it's like, oh God, I feel kind of ignorant, because in a way chart music doesn't dominate in the way that it did in the past, and there weren't these or aren't these immediate places for it to kind of shine, like say Top of the Pops back in the day, where one show showcased this is the mainstream.
It's like a harbour of culture.
Yeah.
If you want to plug in, there are those few places, 1 or 2 or 3 places, Top of the Pops being the biggest one.
Yeah, totally. And now it's all kind of fragmented. So even though there are places that are mainstream, there are a variety of mainstreams in a way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting in that way.
I've often found it hard. I was lucky enough to grow up in a scene in Amersham, where Enter Shikari and Gallows would play, and this great band called Captain Everything, Bubblegum Pop was their kind of thing, and lots of like metal bands as well. And it was a scene, these mixed bills on a Saturday that would start at 6:00 at the community centre, £6 in. It's such like a social hub. It was on fire. It was so much fun.
Sounds amazing.
Those they come and they go, don't they? I mean, that's just how scenes work. In recent years, I've kind of had to find out, because you lose touch with things and bands, and you think, okay, what's the next thing? And, it might be the Windmill for a couple of years, but now it's the George Tavern.
Yeah.
Or it might be the Bird's Nest in a couple of years. It's interesting how, for me, I've sometimes forgotten that I have to get up off my arse and find it. And that's thinking that I think that I'm pretty on it with finding new stuff every day to listen to. You have to go even further than you think you need to.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially as you get older, because scenes revolve around people, and different people get involved in these different scenes, and different scenes move on. So as you say, a scene might come to an end, or it might, as those people get older, change and mutate in a way, and then suddenly these younger people have started their own scene. You don't know anything about it because they're not part of your social group, so you've got to try and keep interested in and see where it's happening, and conversation and meeting people is the best way, and that's one of the great things about in my position. I'm very, very lucky because a lot of people contact me to share their music, and that would be record labels and promotions people, but at the same time it would be new up and coming artists getting in touch with me directly, and then when you talk to them, they'll also say, oh, our mates are really good, and their mates are even better, and so
come to this gig on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, totally, and I try and do that as much as I can.
Yeah. And no one can do that. I mean, I've trying to stop going to so many gigs because it's damaging to a point.
Yeah. I go through phases where you go to quite a few during the week, and then the following week it's like, I cannot face leaving house. It's funny because for years I would moan that my radio show was on Monday to Thursday, and I was missing out on a lot of stuff, and it was annoying me. And then my show moved to Fridays and Saturdays. It's like, oh, brilliant. Okay. One positive of that is that I can go to loads of gigs. And then the pandemic happened, and it's like, oh, there are no gigs to go to. So it's quite funny. But then now that is, we've opened up again, and I find I go through phases of like a week's worth of non-stop gigging, and then it's like, oh wow, I'm exhausted.
That's forgivable. I have a couple of promoter friends who would be like, Giles, why the fuck you didn't come to the gig? I'm like, well, because I was tired. I was ill. I wanted to chill out night, and that's part of it. Because we always want to be on the ball, right? We always want to be there, but we can't always.
Yeah. The regrets I have had so many shows that I've missed. Think, oh no, right?
What's the biggest one? Do you think if it's sorry? This is awful. Yeah. I'm dragging. I don't want to drag up some painful memories, but
I don't know. I don't know, because there was just so many gigs that I've missed out on through my own fault. That's like, why did I do that? And then there are others that other commitments get in the way. And given a bit of time, I could come up with a long list for you, Charles. I'm on the tip of my tongue, I can't think of any. But
tell you mine is Get Cape at the last gig at the Astoria, and it was after school, and I think I had an essay that I hadn't written, and I just needed to do it. I really regret that.
Yeah.
My mates Tom and Harry went, and it was the last gig at the Astoria.
Yeah.
Which was a huge venue for us. That was the venue.
Yeah.
I'm pissed off about that still.
Yeah, understandably. Yeah, I didn't go to that gig, but I've got a friend who kind of managed to kind of sneak in somehow through a back door.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier how people come to you, and people... there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people knowing your name, knowing the station, being like, how can we impress this one person? Which is quite scary when you think about it. But for you, it's like, well, you're like, well, how can I find the next thing that I like? I find that relationship really interesting because there's lots of stories about how a band will maybe design a puzzle and send it in, and you put it together and it says their band name, or send you flowers, or whatever. But that kind of, and I've been there. I've been that person being like, how do I impress this person so they play me on the radio, or I meet them and like we can have fun together. Ultimately, the bottom line is like having fun and going on an adventure. That relationship is very interesting, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's an interesting point because I need them as much as they need me,
right? In
a way, I want to hear their music and I want to hear what they're connected to, because they could open up a whole other world, as we kind of mentioned, and
that's your trade.
Yes, yeah. This is the funny thing. I mean, that is the funny thing, because I'm still coming to terms with the idea that it's a trade or that it's a career, because it's what I'm interested in as well. I mean, obviously, I've got an ulterior motive for that, because I can play them on the radio and share it with other people, and I like to do that. But I want to know about these things anyway. I want to. That's kind of why I'm there.
You're still that NME reader. You're still that melody maker fanatic.
Yeah, totally. And having that knowledge, that's who you want to somehow be locked in with, the people who are going to give you that inside information that will let you experience something that you wouldn't experience otherwise. And that is a thrill in itself when you realize, oh gosh, they've kind of allowed me to find this. Fantastic.
You have those moments. I had it last night listening to University.
Oh right, yeah.
They just put one track out and it's like this mathy post-hardcore, and the singer's screaming about how he doesn't want to be like his dad. And I'm like, fuck yeah,
it's a great track.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, oh, I'm late on this. I'm a week late, and I had it in my inbox.
Right. Yeah.
But I hadn't opened it because I get 8 emails a day.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck, this is so good. And that, like, I was in bed, I was about to go to sleep last night, and I listened to it through my phone speaker. That's not ideal, but it's like, oh, you know, this is awesome. This is what we're here for.
Yeah, totally. No, that's great. I mean, that yeah. And there's so many times that I've missed out on things, or just late to the party. But it doesn't matter, because in some ways, you know, things connect because you're hearing them at the right moment. And often, you know, it's different for people like you and I who are seeking out new music all the time. But in many ways, we also hear things inadvertently that connects with us because it just happens to connect at the right moment. And I think for most people, that is the case, that somehow the music they need is provided passing a shop window, passing a car, and they think, what's that? I think that sounds great. And somehow it hits them at the right point. And that's kind of magic, isn't it?
It is. And I live in quite a nice area where there's a few local pubs where there's lots of punks. And I wonder whether this would happen if I lived in Deptford or not. But I was in the park and I met a friend of a friend, and he was like, oh, you should listen to this band, Island of Love. You might like it. Go home and listen to that first track, and I'm just in love. I'm in love.
Yeah.
You know, and when I mentioned earlier about finding new scenes to kind of go to their gigs, and Island of Love opened up that door to me. You know, we already kind of knew Chubby and the Gang, of course, and a few of those kind of hardcore affiliated bands, but Island of Love, I'm like, these are people 10 years younger than me, and I'm used to being the young person in the room. And I think, cool, I'm going to follow these lot, you know, online and physically. I'm going to go to the gigs that they put on.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think they're over the years, there are always people who, in a way, they decide, right, we're not just bothering with this whole kind of get signed, follow what the industry tells us. In fact, we're not even thinking in those terms. We're not thinking about the industry. We're doing this because we love doing it, and we want to do it, and we have to do it, so we'll just do it. And they're completely ignoring and unaware that other people might be interested in what they're doing. So they're just kind of getting on with it and putting on their own gigs, getting their mates up on stage. And we need that kind of thing to go on. And it has, particularly in the last few years, I think, particularly in a way, post X Factor. I think there may be a kind of generation of people who, when they were kids, it was all about this X Factor thing. And they thought, that's just a load of rubbish. That sucks. No, why would you be interested in that? So you see that, and you move away completely from what you think of as the mainstream thing. I'm not having any involvement. You know, publicity, no, we don't want to do that. No, we just need to tell our friends, and they'll come along, and that'll be fine. And often those are the most creative areas where, you know, they've got a real freedom to be able to do what they want and what they like.
No rules.
No rules. And those scenes keep springing up around the country. And for somebody like me, I want to know about them, you know, and sometimes you have to convince these people that they should tell you about it. You know, that I can see the reluctance in some people, you know, where they're like, oh, you won't like us, no, or you don't want to know about this.
Very self-aware. There's always going to be humility in indie rock.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of musicians in general, no.
Yeah. This is great. Thanks so much, John. Like, these stories is really. I was thinking, you know, I've always been interested on the industry side of things, and I was questioning myself why. And I think it's because the more you know about something, the more fun you can have with it, or at least that's my kind of take on it at the moment.
Yeah. No. Well, I think that sounds very sensible, but also, I mean, I think that for me, I feel like I'm still a fan, and I'm not kind of just saying that, but I think that's my main motivation, is that I am a fan. And I think that for anybody working in related fields, you know, it's important to not lose sight of that. You know, why do you pick up that guitar if that's what you like to do? You know, and when the kind of the work or industry aspect of that comes in, somehow that can spoil that magic. And that is what brings you the joy. It's not whether the numbers stack up or anything like that. It's that initial excitement and enjoyment that is the fundamental part of all of this. And I often, you know, suggest to bands, don't lose sight of that, because that's why you do it. You know, and people, you know, there are so many hurdles and so many disappointments, and the disappointments can really bring you down. And you know, I've always, you know, I've had that myself working in radio, but I've always thought, actually ignore that, just focus on that new band you've heard, that gig you've just seen that you thought was fantastic, and focus on that and sharing that with other people, and that's the fundamental.
Focus on what makes you feel good.
Yes.
Even if it's a weird, strange thing, like I mentioned puzzles earlier, so I'm thinking of puzzles. But even if it's like making, I don't know, like just drawing or whatever, if something like makes you feel good, kind of do it, right?
Yeah, totally. It could be Wordle.
Wordle. I'm on Duolingo recently.
Right.
And I kind of hate the social aspect of it because it's dinging me, saying like, "Oh, you're late to the party today," or
right.
Someone said congratulations. I want to study my German alone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. No, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean it's funny, isn't it? Those tools.
They always try and make it social.
Yeah.
Hey, John, thank you so much for being up for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Giles.
Your stories are brilliant. I'd just like to end with, and we talked about it at the start. I don't know if we were recording or not, but mistakes and making, going down those wrong directions, or it could be, working at a restaurant and you trip up and smash the plate of full English breakfast or glasses of beers that you're working at the pub. I've always been that person. All my school reports were slightly intelligent, somewhat intelligent, but doesn't commit, doesn't contribute much to the class. I feel like I've kind of carried that into my professional life. Not music, as I've always been full on, fully engaged, maybe too engaged. My sort of part-time jobs, working at the pub and working at restaurants, I've always kind of fucked it, basically. So I quite like hearing these stories of work gaffes, classic scrapes in the workplace.
Right.
If anything comes to mind.
Oh wow, gosh. So this is non-broadcast tales. This is work doing other kind of job. I don't know.
It can be broadcast.
Yeah. No, I mean the biggest on-air gaffes is when you get something wrong, or
the name of a record, or
the name of a record, or you haven't done your homework, so you say, "How did you meet?" And it turns out that they're brothers or sisters or something really, really stupid like that.
Have you been stunned? Have you had that moment where you freeze up and you quite not sure what the next step is?
Yeah, completely. you kind of lose track of what you're saying, all that kind of stuff. But other work gaffes. I've never worked in hospitality. I've not really worked in a pub or a restaurant, so I've not spilled drinks over people or things like that. I have, I guess, on a professional level, I once forgot the name of a band that I was introducing on stage. That was terrible.
How did you come back from that?
I didn't. They got really annoyed and angry, and that was embarrassing.
So how did that play? Did you wing it and not quite fully say the name?
Luckily they kind of one of them had a go, and then they got on with their gig and started to play. It was
there are so many bands.
Yeah, it was an event that I wasn't. It wasn't one I had curated. I was asked to be the host on a stage at a festival, and I hadn't had any involvement in any of the choices. So it's like get up on and just introduce them, and I was not on top of it.
It happens.
Yeah, it does happen.
Of course it happens.
Yeah.
It's funny. I in a way, I hope you don't mind. I quite enjoy that happen. I'm enjoying that.
Yeah. Oh no.
I'm sure lots of people are.
People love hearing me make.
It's not you.
Mistakes.
It's anyone.
Yeah. No, but it is funny. It is funny. No, I've been Yeah, I remember once. Well, I could. There are too many to mention. Too many to mention.
Great, John. Thanks so much. X-Posure Daily. You've been enjoying it.
Yes, very much so. So it's just launched. We're a couple of weeks in, and the whole idea is it's another outlet for me to share new music as and when I get it. And so the idea is that it can be there every day. So we can scour the internet. We can listen to long radio shows. But if you just want an hour to catch up on what's just come out, X-Posure Daily's for you.
There are so many great bands.
Yes, oh totally. No, there's no short. I mean, in a way, my show and X-Posure Daily is for people who say, oh, you know what, there's no good bands at the moment, there's no great new music. And it's like every single day somebody puts out an amazing new track. Every single night an amazing new band is playing somewhere. You do have to go and seek them. That's how you do it. And sometimes the positions and the opportunities to do that are not so great. So something like X-Posure Daily is just another way of trying to do that and put it in front of people and say, look, here it is. It's really easy. It's really accessible. You can keep up yourself just by listening to this.
It's great for us. I'll whack it on. It's an hour. I'll be doing whatever I need to be doing that afternoon, that day.
Yeah.
Finding out about new tunes.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
No downside.
Yeah. That's the way I see it, Giles. Thank you.
How do people get in touch? People listening to this who are in bands thinking, fuck yeah, I want to be on X-Posure Daily.
I'm on socials. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. john.kennedy@radiox.co.uk is my email address. Good place to send music, MP3s. Very useful. I like a download. It's nice having a Spotify link, but if I get excited by something, I like to be able to download it and then play it on the show as soon as I can. Streams aren't reliable for airplay, so to have something, it's almost physical.
Dropbox is probably the best way, isn't it?
Dropbox link, but one that's accessible. Sometimes you need a
Google
password.
Drive is bad for that.
Right? Yeah, it's like,
Dropbox is a little bit better.
Anything that you can get it immediately and it becomes yours, so you can use it in whatever way.
Go into your DMs and tweet at you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Excellent.
Ace, John, thanks so much.
Pleasure, Giles. Thank you.
So there he was, John Kennedy on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Lots of great stuff in there. Stories from his own time, but some good nuggets of gold if you're in a band and trying to get on the radio. John is such a polite person, and we kind of touched on it then, but I think it's worth saying again, it's really easy to think about someone you're trying to get in touch with and think, oh my God, they're a million miles away. A polite, short, easy message can go a long way. So cheers for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with Crispian Mills, singer of legendary British rockers Cooler Shaker. Subscribe to 101 Part-Time Jobs and get notified first. Cheers!
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.